You. The White House hasn't confirmed this settlement effort, but explain what Trump's team appears to be seeking from the Department of Justice and why.
Good morning, Ali. Well, we've confirmed this settlement effort at MSNBC, if not the actual number of the damages that they're seeking. They've made some claims, two separate claims, one involving the Russia investigation and one involving the Mar-a-Lago investigation. In both cases, Donald Trump is claiming that the government violated his rights and his privacy. And that's the first thing here, is that there is just no evidence that that happened. Both of these investigations were properly predicated. They've been reviewed by independent fact finders, and they've been found to have been carried out properly. And in the case of Mar-a-Lago, Judge Eileen Cannon, who ruled in favor of Donald Trump on some very controversial issues, never ruled that the search of his Mar-a-Lago compound was improper or violated his rights. So that's number one. There's just no evidence to support these claims. The other issue, of course, is who's going to decide whether the claims should be paid out and how much. By Justice Department regulation, it's the Deputy Attorney General, who's Todd Blanche, who represented Donald Trump in the Mar-a-Lago case and other criminal cases, and then the head of the Civil Division, Stanley Woodward, who represented one of his co-defendants in Mar-a-Lago. But of course, Donald Trump is making clear in some new comments that they're not really the deciders here. He's the decider. Take a listen.
I don't know what the numbers are. I don't even talk to them about it. All I know is that they would owe me a lot of money, but I'm not looking for money. I'd give it to charity or something. It's interesting because I'm the one that makes a decision, right? And, that decision would have to go across my desk. And it's awfully strange to make a decision where I'm paying myself. In other words, did you ever have one of those cases where you have to decide how much you're paying yourself in damages? But I was damaged very greatly, and any money that I would get, I would give to charity.
This whole episode just underscores how the idea that the U.S. government can engage in independent fact-finding and do things separate from what Donald Trump wants appears to be a very tenuous idea, if not out the window at this moment, Ali.
I think that's exactly right, Ken. But Barrett, even though the White House isn't confirming this outright, yes, Ken is right that our teams have confirmed large parts of it. But then you've also got the president talking there, saying it's a decision where I'm paying myself. He also then says, I don't need the money. But if it's not about the money, then what's it about?
I think this is very clearly about President Trump wanting some sort of retribution for what he claims were, witch hunts against him that really haunted his entire first administration. We've seen this not only with these administrative proceedings that are really precursors to lawsuits, but in the indictments that we've seen of people like James Comey, who he holds personally responsible for being one of the people that started these investigations. I think these, proceedings show us a few things. The first is what a terrible idea ethically it is to have your former personal defense attorneys acting as members of your administration now. The fact that Todd Blanche could be asked to decide a motion like this after previously representing the president in these very proceedings, there's just no way ethically that he could do that with a straight face. So this, more than anything, exemplifies that very clear conflict of interest.
So, Anna, I will ask you about your text messages in a few minutes, but first I want to get you on this topic. The idea, as both Barrett and Ken have laid out for us, of all of the competing cross-currents here, but typically, let's say on Earth B, if we're living in a vacuum, it's very hard to successfully sue the DOJ, right? So is there any merit to Trump's argument, and would he be owed restitution, put aside all of the different competing cross-currents and reasons that people should be recused from this?
No, look, you're right that it is incredibly hard to sue the Justice Department for a number of reasons to get restitution for this type of thing. There are people who will spend decades in prison and then be released because there's some type of exculpatory evidence that is found or for other reasons. And then, they're not able to receive restitution, much less for all the reasons that Ken already explained, the fact that these investigations were properly predicated. I covered these cases. I know the facts very well and the background of these investigations. Even Judge Eileen Cannon, it wasn't that she dismissed Trump's case related to classified documents because of any kind of, prosecutorial misconduct or that kind of thing. It was a very technical appointments clause issue. So, I think that it's going to be a very, very difficult here. Although, of course, course, as you have pointed out, there's these questions around the people who are making these types of decisions of who can get a settlement. And it raises all kinds of conflict of interest questions because those individuals may very well be the president's former defense attorneys.
Yeah, Barrett, we were just asking Anna to live on Earth B, where all of this is happening in a vacuum. But let's get squarely back to Earth A, where we are right now. If the Trump DOJ does approve a Trump settlement like this, what are the ways or the legal avenues to even challenge it? Do those exist?
They may not exist. I mean, the biggest check on this may be some sort of a political check. Remember, any money that is given out in a payment for this, comes directly from taxpayers. So there's not a specific fund that's put away for this. This comes from taxpayer money, and so there may well be political ramifications. Now, could groups try to file motions in court stopping this? Absolutely, but ultimately, the power to make these decisions lays very squarely within the Justice Department and within two individuals, as Ken said, Todd Blanche and also Stanley Woodward. So I don't know, aside from the very clear ethics issue, I don't know that there would be so much legal recourse. However, one would think there would be at least a little bit of political blowback from this.
With me to dig deeper, MSNBC Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Dilanian. Norm Eisen was White House ethics czar under President Obama and is also the founder and executive chair of the Democracy Defenders Fund. Barbara McQuaid served as U.S. Attorney for Michigan's Eastern District and is an MSNBC legal analyst. Stuart Stevens was Mitt Romney's chief strategist in 2012, is now a senior advisor at the Lincoln Project. Thanks to all of you. So, Norm, the president says it's his decision. I mean, the situation is unique. But it's not unusual for people to file claims against the administration. I mean, typically as a precursor to a lawsuit. But can Donald Trump do just that? Just make the decision by himself?
No, Chris, that's not how it works. First of all, these decisions have to be approved by DOJ. Ethics rules apply to DOJ, where when you have Pam Bondi or Todd Blanche, the senior officials who would have to approve this, who were formerly Donald Trump's lawyers, they have to recuse themselves. That's the first guardrail. If they continue to have personal legal entanglements and they're actually advocating for Donald Trump against the United States government, those ethics rules can rise to the level of criminal restrictions that can be violated. And then, Chris, there's the little thing known as the United States Constitution. Donald Trump is not supposed to be able to reach across the counter and grab the government's money and put it in his own pocket. It's called the Emoluments Clause, applies in the foreign context, also to domestic money. So there are multiple rules that are being threatened here. And at Democracy Defenders Fund, we have over 200 cases and matters against Donald Trump. If he tries this, it'll be 201.
So you raised so many questions with what you just said, but let me ask you specifically about saying that Todd Blanche or Pam Bondi would have to recuse themselves. If they didn't, then what? Who would take action against them?
Chris, when we've seen behavior from others that raise issues of illegality, there are places where you can file those complaints. So if Todd Blanche and Pam Bondi break the ethical rules, you can go to the state bars of which they're a member, the Department of Justice, Office of the Inspector General, the Office of Professional Responsibility. These are not small duties, and it could also be the subject of a larger piece of litigation if this heist of $230 million actually happens. There are multiple avenues. And then, of course, there's congressional oversight as well.
All right. So, Ken, let's back up for a minute and lay out exactly what the president is saying about why he thinks he's owed nearly $250 million of taxpayer money.
Chris, I've been talking to current and former DOJ officials about this and looking at the relevant laws and regulations. So first of all, these claims go back to the Biden administration. There's one about the Russia investigation where Donald Trump claims that his rights were violated because of that investigation. And there's a separate one about the Mar-a-Lago search of his property and that investigation into his mishandling of classified documents, where he says his rights and privacy were violated in that case. The important thing to know is that both of those cases were exhaustively looked at by independent fact finders. In the Mueller case, case, a special counsel, and there was nothing of the kind found. There was no finding that Donald Trump's rights were violated or that anything inappropriate was done in those cases. And in fact, in the Mar-a-Lago case, the judge, Eileen Cannon, who made some very controversial rulings in Donald Trump's favor, nonetheless upheld the legality of that search and rejected Donald Trump's claims that the search was illegal or his rights were violated or the FBI acted improperly. So that's number one. If the Justice Department makes a finding that Donald Trump's rights were violated, that would be a great injury to the facts. And then the second question is, who approves this? There's nothing in the law or regulation that calls for the president to be involved in this in any way. As Norm said, the law says that the Justice Department, and particularly the Deputy Attorney General, has to rule on claims of over $1 million. And there's a whole process involved in this. Look, I've talked to the Justice Department, and they say they will comply with the ethical rules. But the question is, if Todd Blanche recuses himself, does that matter in the end? Because we're living in a world where everyone who works at the Justice Department, particularly the political appointees, know that they defy Donald Trump's wishes at their...
Donald's really getting hit hard this time. And it's not just a PR disaster. It's a potential legal mess that could seriously backfire. The big takeaway here is that judges are no longer siding with him the way they used to. The tide's turning, and he's starting to feel it. What's especially wild is that this situation looks even worse than what many critics called his pay-to-play pressure tactics on private companies. Remember how, right after his election win, he started throwing lawsuits and legal threats around like confetti? Corporations, law firms, individuals, no one was off limits. The message was clear. If you don't want trouble, you better stay on his good side. And the thing is, those companies often folded, not because they thought Trump had a strong case. Legal experts said most of those claims were nonsense, but because they feared what he'd do once he was back in power. It wasn't about justice. It was about leverage. But this time, it's a completely different kind of scandal. This isn't Trump strong-arming private businesses. This is him dipping directly into taxpayer money, and that crosses a whole new line. You can almost understand people looking the other way when it's private corporations losing a few million. They'll survive. But when it's public funds, the money that's supposed to go toward healthcare, infrastructure, education, that's every American's pocket he's reaching into. All while he's slashing taxes for the ultra-rich and leaving everyday people to deal with fewer public services. So when you add this on top of everything else, it starts to look less like draining the swamp and more like rebranding it. A golden Trump logo flashing over the same old corruption. Honestly, this might be the most blatant cash grab he's ever pulled. And for once, it's not just about political optics or corporate influence. It's about him getting caught trying to profit off the very people he claimed to represent.